Ever get that feeling when you're grilling up a juicy steak and a tiny voice in the back of your head whispers, should I really be worried about this?
Oh, yeah.
We're diving into that age-old question today. Does red meat really increase your risk of colon cancer?
It's a question with a surprising amount of nuance.
It really is. And luckily for us, you have been digging through the research for this deep
I
dive.
have.
We're talking about a 2017 review published in Experimental Biology and Medicine, right?
That's right. And this review analyzed over 40 different studies
Wow.
on red meat and colon cancer. So it gives us a much broader perspective than any single study ever could.
Yeah, that's really helpful for something like this.
It is.
Okay, so let's break this down.
Okay.
The review really hones in on something called heme iron.
Right.
Now, I know that iron is in red meat, but what makes heme iron different?
So heme iron is a specific type of iron
Okay.
that's found in red meat, and it's been kind of a primary suspect in a lot of these colon cancer studies. But here's the catch. A lot of these studies use crazy high levels of heme, like 9 to 22 times what you'd find in like a typical serving of steak.
Wait, 22 times. So we're talking about amounts that you would like practically never consume in real life.
Exactly.
Yep.
Like comparing an apple to a truckload of apples.
Oh, yeah.
One study even used blood sausage as their like realistic source of heme.
Blood sausage. Okay, so you're telling me that my weekend brunch just became a scientific study.
Kind of.
That's both concerning and intriguing at the same time.
Right.
But seriously, how can we take those findings seriously if they're based on such extreme amounts?
That's a very valid point, and I think the amount of heme iron in blood sausage is in a whole different league compared to a burger or a steak.
Right.
So those studies kind of raise more questions than they answer, especially when you consider how our gut plays into all of this.
Right, we hear a lot about the importance of gut bacteria these days.
All the
How
time.
does that factor into the equation?
So your gut microbiota, all those bacteria living in your gut, they're like this complex ecosystem,
Right.
and they're crucial for colon health.
Okay.
And interestingly, some studies suggest that the positive changes in your gut bacteria that we get from fiber,
Okay.
fruits, veggies, whole grains,
Sure.
might actually counteract some of the potential downsides of red meat.
So it's like a balancing act in our gut. Eat our veggies, maybe still enjoy a burger occasionally.
In a way, yes. And what's really fascinating is that it might not even be about having specific good or bad bacteria.
Okay.
It's more about the overall balance in your gut,
Interesting.
specifically the ratio of gram-negative to gram-positive bacteria.
Okay, so it's not as simple as just red meat equals bad. There's a whole microscopic world influencing things.
There is.
But before I go build a shrine to fiber, this review did mention some limitations in the studies, right?
Yeah.
Not everything is as cut and dry as it may seem.
You're right, and these limitations are really crucial, I think, to understanding the bigger picture. We can't just extrapolate from these studies and apply the findings directly to humans without considering the real world.
Okay, so what kind of factors are we talking about that might be skewing the results?
Well, a lot of these studies use purified diets, which are nothing like what people actually eat.
Right, because who only eats steak? Unless you're a cartoon character, your diet is a bit more diverse than that.
Exactly. For example, many of these studies use unrealistically low levels of calcium,
Okay.
which is important because calcium may actually reduce some of the negative effects that are associated with red meat.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not just about counteracting the iron. Tell me more about this calcium connection.
It's true.
Yeah.
One study even found that high calcium in the control group,
Okay.
these were the animals not even getting the high heme,
Right.
actually increased the number of precancerous lesions.
Wow.
So it really highlights how important context is.
Okay, so context is key. We've got to look at the whole picture, not just single out red meat. But besides calcium, what other factors might be playing a protective role here? It's like they always say it's complicated.
It is.
But seriously, I'm starting to see that this red meat and colon cancer connection has a lot more layers than I think I realized.
It does.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest takeaways for me from this review was the importance of looking beyond just heme iron.
Right. We've talked about calcium, but what about other things we eat? Could they be affecting the results of these studies too?
Absolutely. And a lot of research doesn't fully account for the sheer variety of compounds we consume in just a typical meal.
Yeah.
Vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, even how the food is cooked.
Right.
It all plays a role.
It's a good reminder that we're not living on these purified diets in a lab.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we
Hey.
briefly touched on cooking methods earlier.
Yeah.
Does how we cook our meat really affect cancer risk?
It can.
Okay.
The review highlighted that cooking meat at really high temperatures,
Yeah.
like grilling or frying, can create compounds that have been linked to an increased risk of cancer.
Okay, so maybe swapping out those grill marks for a roast in the oven every now and then isn't a bad idea.
It's something to consider for sure.
Okay.
And this actually ties back into the importance of looking at dietary patterns as a whole,
Okay.
rather than just demonizing specific foods.
So zoom out and see the whole picture.
Exactly.
Mm.
So instead of getting bogged down in whether or not a single steak will send you running to the doctor,
Right.
think about what else is on your plate consistently.
Okay.
Are you eating a variety of fruits and vegetables? Are you getting enough fiber from sources like whole grains and legumes?
This is starting to feel less like a red meat witch hunt and more like a friendly reminder to just eat our veggies.
That's a really good way to put it.
Okay.
And remember, all those other components of a healthy diet, they can work together to offset potential risks from red meat.
Right.
And we see this with the fiber example, and there's also interesting research on resistant starch.
Oh, yeah, resistant starch.
Yeah.
We did a deep dive on fiber a while back.
Right.
All about keeping things moving, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But resistant starch sounds a bit more resistant.
It's a type of fiber that's well resistant to digestion in the small intestine.
Okay.
So it actually ferments in the colon,
Okay.
creating beneficial byproducts that may actually help protect against cancer.
Okay, so it's not just about bulk. It's about what those fibers are doing in our gut.
Right.
So more beans with my steak. Got it.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
There's research showing that including resistant starch alongside red meat can actually reduce DNA damage in the colon.
Now that's what I'm talking about, turning a potentially risky meal into a health-conscious choice.
Right.
I love it when a plan comes together.
It's all about finding that balance.
Yeah.
And speaking of balance, you mentioned earlier how everyone's gut is different.
Great.
That's another factor that makes it really difficult to just make blanket statements about red meat.
Right, because we're all walking around with our own little internal ecosystems.
Exactly. Your gut microbiome is unique to you.
Okay.
It's shaped by your genetics, your environment, even your diet over time.
Wow.
What might cause a negative reaction in one person's gut could be perfectly fine for someone else.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it.
It is.
And it really highlights how important it is to pay attention to your own body.
Right.
Talk to your doctor or registered dietitian
Yes.
about your individual needs.
Absolutely.
Because what works for one person might not work for another.
We each have unique genetic makeups, lifestyles, and health histories.
Yeah.
There is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to diet and health.
So we've covered heme iron, the incredible world of our gut microbiome, confounding factors that make research tricky,
Yeah.
and those protective elements like fiber and resistant starch. It's a lot to digest, so to speak.
It is.
Where does that leave us? What do we want our listeners to kind of walk away with?
It really all comes back to the bigger picture.
Right.
The relationship between red meat and colon cancer is so much more complex than any headline can ever really capture.
It's like we're trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, but we only have a few pieces.
Right.
We're learning all about these individual factors, but it's like putting it all together into a really clear picture.
Yeah.
It's still a work in progress.
It is, but I think the most important message for our listeners is this.
Okay.
Focusing on a healthy dietary pattern as a whole
Right.
is so much more impactful than just fixating on any single food.
So instead of interrogating our grocery list, we should be asking ourselves, am I eating a variety of colorful vegetables? Am I getting enough fiber from different sources? That kind of thing.
It's about making, sustainable, healthy choices that support your overall well-being.
Okay, so it's really a holistic approach.
It is.
Okay.
And don't forget about those other really important but often overlooked aspects of a healthy lifestyle.
Right.
Managing stress, getting enough sleep, moving your body regularly.
Right, because it's not just about what we're eating. It's about how we're living.
Precisely, it's all connected.
Yeah.
But going back to the research for a moment, there's one final point I wanted to highlight.
Okay.
This review didn't just focus on the potential negative impacts of red meat.
Right.
It really reminded us of the incredible power of our bodies to adapt and protect themselves,
Okay.
especially when we give them the right tools.
That's a really empowering way to think about it. It's not just about avoiding harm. It's about actively supporting our body's natural defenses.
Exactly. And that's where all those healthy habits that we talked about come into play.
Yeah.
A diverse diet,
Okay.
regular exercise, stress management.
Right.
These things don't just impact our risk for specific diseases.
Right.
They actually give our bodies the resources that they need to really thrive.
I love that.
Right. Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Good.
And hopefully it's done the same for you, our listeners.
Yeah.
Remember, knowledge is power. And now you're armed with a much deeper understanding of this whole red meat and colon cancer conversation.
Yeah. But as we always say, there's always more to learn.
Always.
Keep asking those questions. Stay curious.
Right.
And most importantly, enjoy your food.
Yes.
Mindfully, of course.
Of course.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll be back soon with a brand new topic.
Sounds good.
And a whole new set of fascinating insights. Until next time.